Hey everyone, my name's Arrow. I go by they, them pronouns, and yeah. uh, so I've been wanting to make a video like this or like something like this for a long time. Um, yeah. I have struggled with my mental health for, well, I've struggled with my mental health since I was probably like, it was when I was 12. It was either the spring or the fall of 2012. I'm not really sure. It's all kind of hard to figure out exactly when things started to get bad. I kind of remember some of the details of what it was like, but I don't remember when it was. So it's been a while. I'm 18 now, so that's a thing. And the biggest hurdle probably around, or the thing that's probably been one of the most difficult things for me regarding my mental health has been talking about it. So putting it in a space that's public is incredibly empowering and freeing. So I really hope I actually post this. And I've done it a bit with my poetry, and poetry that definitely is, mental illness related, but outright actually talking about it is hard. But I want to do this because I think as a personal goal, it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I think it means a lot to me to be able to do this and to be able to actually talk about this to other people. And also I think it could help people for me to talk about it as well. Because, I have struggled with stigma a lot. In the beginning, I didn't, okay, let me be more specific. So I struggle with generalized anxiety disorder and depression. And yeah, I really started to feel my depression when I was talking about that when I was younger. And starting to feel like disconnected from things, starting to be more antisocial than I already was, because I'm an introvert, so I'm already kind of antisocial. But yeah, and just not caring about things as much until just really starting to feel more apathetic and just more I just didn't care and I didn't find enjoyment from things. And I just started to feel kind of withdrawn and more in my head and see myself more and more negatively. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what it was. And when I did, even before I figured out what it was, I didn't tell anyone, because I've always kind of toughened things. I've toughened up and, fought through things and I can handle it, whatever. And so I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I just won't tell anyone. And then I realized this isn't fine. And I really started to want to tell people. I was so afraid of hurting people, and I didn't want to do that. I still was like, okay, maybe I can just fix this on my own. I don't want to hurt these people. I don't want to burden these people with my problems. It's probably not that big of a deal. And for a long, long time, it took me a long time to unlearn this, but I felt almost like I wasn't really depressed for a long time. And then after that, I was like, I definitely am. I've definitely struggled with my mental health, but I couldn't tell people because I didn't deserve to feel this way. I didn't deserve to feel depressed because my life was really good at that point from an outsider standpoint. I had a supportive group of friends, and I had good family, and I had a stable living condition. I didn't know I was trans or queer. I was in a place where I should have been doing well. And my struggle with mental illness wasn't caused by a traumatic event. So I didn't really understand. And I was like, I don't deserve to feel this way. I can't feel this way. And even if I do, it's because I'm not trying hard enough. I'm pathetic for feeling this way, and stuff like that. So that kind of contribute to why I didn't tell people too. And also eventually, like, it became a safety blanket for me in a way. Like, I really started to lose control of everything. I was having panic attacks very frequently. I was just, my mind didn't feel like mine. It was constantly saying awful things to me all the time. I was having a lot of thoughts. I started to have a lot of thoughts of like killing myself or hurting myself, and I started hurting myself to try to cope with things, and try to gain a sense of control, and also to feel like I was valid in my struggle, and like also just because it like calmed me down. It wasn't a healthy way of doing that, and it wasn't ultimately beneficial. I don't know. It's like there's a lot of better things I could have started doing that would have had the same effect that weren't self-harm. But once you kind of get into it, once you do it enough, it's really hard to stop. And also I didn't want to at that point. But just, I felt really out of control. I felt like my mind and my body were against me. I was so tired and so exhausted all the time. I didn't have any energy. I was sore. I, had a lot of aches and pains, and I had headaches all the time. And I was also experiencing, I have other head issues, so I don't know how much of it's related to my mental health and how much is just because I have issues with my head, but I had like migraines and dizziness spells as well. But, so I was experiencing all that, and then at the same time, like, my brain was always against me, and every time I did something, it was never good enough. I was pathetic. I was worthless. I sucked. I had all these thoughts, and I didn't know what to do with them. And eventually, like, I started repressing everything. So I got to a point where I would just feel awful all the time. And I didn't know why, because I wasn't processing my thoughts. I wasn't aware I was having thoughts, and I wasn't aware of what my feelings were exactly. So I couldn't figure out what was causing them or how to deal with it, because I only really had one feeling that was awful or really awful, or like I said, I guess one, that's more than one, but yeah. And so it was, or like really, really awful, or like just, so it was really hard. And so I just hid all my feelings, because that was something that I could do. That's something I understood how to do. And, people didn't notice. I seemed happy. I seemed fine. When I was self-harming, I was so afraid when I decided I really need to start doing that. Originally, I didn't realize I was self-harming, because I would chew on the inside of my lips sometimes when I was bored, like the inside of my cheek. And I started, when I was feeling really depressed, I just remember when I was just feeling really, really awful, I started to do that, and I started to bite really hard and tear off pieces of the inside of my gums, and just having that sense of, like, having that feel of pain and sometimes tasting the blood, like that calmed me down, and in a weird sadistic way. And I just, my depression really liked to make me feel like I was destroying myself, because I hated that. But then I also, like, that part of me just felt satisfied from watching me tear my life apart, or watching me hurt myself. And I don't know, my brain was just really fucked up. And yeah, so once I realized what that was, I wanted more of it. But I didn't want to cut, because I was so afraid of people finding out. And I was like, there's no real good way to hide those scars and the cuts. And I knew that it was addictive. So I'm like, if I get addicted to it, there'll be too many and people will find out. And I was so scared of someone finding out. I was so terrified. So I tried to do other more subtle ways. So I did the cheek thing. I started pushing push pins into my legs, but it wasn't really the right sort of sense. So I ended up being like, screw it, and I also just really wanted people to find out, but I really didn't at the same time. Like, I'm like, I want someone to be like, hey, I get it, and like, I can help you figure this out. But also at the same time, I was so terrified. I didn't want anyone to find out. And I probably, if someone said that to me and someone said like, hey, I can see you're depressed, I would have completely denied it and lied to them and felt offended and would have trusted that person less. Because, so I mean, I don't know for sure, but yeah. So anyways, but I wanted to be a bit more visible, and I also just needed something else that was more satisfying for pain. So I started pinching. So I would pinch my wrists and dig my fingernails into my skin so deep that it broke skin, and created scars that would last anywhere from a few days to like months, or not months, but like a month probably, and it would bruise and stuff too. So I did that for a long time, often, and I would wear things that kind of covered it a little bit still sometimes, but did that, and I'd make sure I didn't have too many in the same spot so it didn't look weird. No one really questioned it. I don't know if anyone really noticed that much. I spent a lot of my time alone, most of my time alone. I really tried to avoid people, and when I was alone, I really tried to shut off my brain, so I would, constantly watch shows. I originally started reading, but then I couldn't focus enough to do that, so I watched shows, but sometimes I would just completely zone out, and I'd really either drift back into my head into the negative thoughts, or I would just stop functioning and just stare because I was just so tired, but I feel so awful and so numb all the time. And also sometimes and I feel so chaotic and so upset, and sometimes I did start experiencing panic attacks. So, and that was when that was when my mom started actually really noticing my mental health, because I got really bad panic attacks, and they're a lot harder to hide. Most of the time I experienced them alone, but if I had them in front of someone who knows kind of what that is, I couldn't hide it, because I'd lose. I've experienced a couple different types of panic attacks, and so like experienced them in different ways, but most of the time, and especially in the beginning, or not in the beginning, but like in that part of my life, I guess, I experienced panic attacks of completely like losing control of my body. And I had no idea how to start. When I started to feel really anxious, I had no idea how to calm myself down, so it happened that way. And then I get to a point where I did lose control of my body, and my brain would stop kind of working, and I just feel like a squirrel in a live trap, just bouncing around. I felt like I was screaming and stuff, but I wasn't. And when I was experiencing a panic attack in front of someone, I'd feel like I was causing a huge scene, and I'd feel so bad and so guilty, and even if it wasn't really that noticeable, I'd feel so awful. So I started saying like, oh, I'm sorry, but then I couldn't stop saying it. So I had multiple times where I said, I'm sorry, and then I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and I couldn't stop, and I would be hyperventilating. I'd start to have like black spots in my vision. I'd either be pacing or rocking. I'd often go like this, or shake my legs, or both. And yeah, it was, and when I was saying that I'm sorry, all I could think of was I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, or like, I want this to stop, and I couldn't do anything. And eventually, I often cried too, and I just had to wait until it was over. And then after it was over, I'd usually feel awful, and I feel weak and pathetic and angry at myself and guilty. So it was awful. But yeah, so after kind of my mom seeing that too, she gave me the option to try to seek counseling. But the thing is, counseling was so hard to access in the town that I lived. Everyone in that town also seemed super happy and like they had their shit together. So that kind of amplified my feeling of otherness and my feeling of like looking down on myself. But eventually I moved. And well, before that, actually, something I wanted to talk about too is that things did get really, really bad. The way I perceived myself got really rough and really awful, and I did end up becoming very suicidal for quite a while, actually. And there's different reasons for why I didn't do it. Either just